Last time we had class, we looked at the map skills of Asia and climate, specifically looking at monsoon wind patterns. Remember, the monsoon patterns are always moving from high pressure to low pressure. In the winter months, you'll see that it is a dry season. And in the summer months, it is a wet season. That's because from the high pressured area, the winds travel northerly into the continent, bringing the moisture from the Indian Ocean. From reviewing that, you can remember that we also went over the geography of China, and we paid specific attention to the Himalayan Mountains, the tallest mountains in the world. And we looked at how the precipitation was affected by those mountains, having the driest desert on Earth, the Taklamakan Desert, north of the Himalayas, and one of the wettest places on Earth, the Ganges River Delta, with over 467 inches of rainfall per year. That is incredible. So now that we know that, and we've reviewed that, let's look at this map. First, I want you to identify this map of what it is by looking at it first. Then we'll look at what the impact is and the correlation between this map and the previous maps. So, with your partner, please look at this map, analyze it, and unsum it, making marks, questions, and notes. I'll see you soon. Please pause the video. Now that you've discussed this with your partner, I want the class to report out and tell what they've found. Please pause the video. At this point, you should have realized that this was a population map, looking at the legend at the bottom and the different colors indicating the population densities and locations. Notice the population in China in the east is incredibly compact, and also the population in northern India is one of the most densely populated in the world. Most of the people within this circle live along the Ganges River, an incredible river that we'll discuss in further lessons. I'm going to erase this now, and let's go back to these other maps. Why is the population located in the areas that it is? Discuss that with your partner. Please pause the video. Now that you've had those discussions, please use the responders to answer the next questions, starting with this one. Then go through the questions, have discussions between each, finding the correct answer and why, and then we'll move on to the next section. Good luck! Now that you've finished those responder questions, we're going to move on to the next type, and that is rainfall and crop cultivation. So, looking at the precipitation or annual rain year fall, we've looked at where the most rain is and where the least rain is. Now, how does that affect the agriculture or the cultivation of China? So, looking at this, we can look at the different zones and crops that are cultivated. Take a second, maybe 30 seconds, and talk to your neighbor and discuss why you might see these crops and where. You probably noticed that this area has pasture or oasis. That's because there's little rainfall in this area. Remember, when we look back at this map of China, we can see that there's lots of yellows, oranges, and reds. And if we look here, you'll see that there's little agriculture being done. Yet, if we look down in the very south of China, we're seeing a double rice cultivation, meaning that they actually have 2 crops of rice produced during every growing season, or the growing season really never stops because of the warm climate. Think about Florida. If you've ever been to Disney World or Florida or in the south of America, you'll remember that it was really hot, really humid, and the growing season never really ceases there, which is why we have orange juice all year long. If you go a little bit north, you'll see that it's a rice-dominant area, which still needs a lot of moisture and warm weather, but doesn't quite receive the same amount as in the south. And in the north, we're seeing a wheat-dominated area. That's because it is a warmer area, but not quite warm enough to harvest rice. kind of like our area. This is actually along the exact same latitude as New Jersey. So where we are on the Earth is roughly the same place here, just on the other side. So we have really similar climates, really similar weather patterns, and actually, in our area, we used to grow a lot of wheat. Now we grow most of it out in the Midwest, where you'll probably think that we grow a lot of corn in this area. Let's turn to the next slide. Here's a more thorough view of China, and what are we looking at here? Please talk to your neighbor and discuss what kind of map this is while taking some notes. Please pause the video. You probably noticed that this map was about elevation. You can see how mountainous Japan is and how mountainous parts of Korea are. But actually, if you look to the west and north of China, it is a very high elevation with the Tibetan Plateau, which is another way to say the Himalayan Mountains. The mountains are so high in this area that where the valleys are is still over 18,000 to 20,000 feet. And because of that, almost no one or nothing can live in this area. If you look a little more north, you'll see the Taklamakan Desert. This is the second largest desert in the world, and I've talked about it quite a few times. If you look back to this map, you'll see that this red area here, circled in red, is that area that doesn't get much rainfall. That is the Taklamakan Desert. If you travel more east and look in this area, this is where you'll find the capital, Beijing, and you'll see that it's not that high in elevation, but it's also not low elevation either. Now, take a second, use your responders, have those discussions between each question, and I'll see you in a little bit. Good luck. Please pause the video. After you've answered this question, hopefully you discuss what the word correlation means. This is something we've discussed before in class, and it has to do with a connection. Hopefully you realized that there was a connection between what was being grown and how much rainfall occurs in any given area. So this area here would be that double rice crop cultivation because of the temperature and the amount of rainfall. Remember, looking at those terraces from Wild China, the video we viewed a couple of weeks ago, you'll remember that terracing spanned over thousands of feet in elevation, but also hundreds of square miles in that area. And that's the area we're talking about here. A lot of this area is of a higher elevation, but also of a warm climate. So you have that terracing because of the elevation and the warm climate because of its geography, allowing there to be a lot of crop cultivation in the south of China. So that's the correlation. Because of the warm weather and the rainfall, we have that much crop cultivation in the south of China. Now that you've had the discussion, let's move on to the next slide. I'd like for you to meet with a partner. Analyze what you know about these images in the text below, and then figure out which one of these images belongs to which one of these numbers. I want you to talk to your neighbor for about a minute, and then people will come up to the board and figure out which picture goes with which number. You should be able to figure this out using the previous knowledge of this class, but if not, you can use any of the maps we've discussed before in class, and that is what I hope you do. So, talk to your neighbor, and I'll see you in a little bit. Please pause the video.